All right. So basically, I have this philosophy type of thing of first principles and rules for execution. And so timing is one of the big rules for execution, and just in general, right? We could go down a rabbit hole with this, but trying to understand the philosophical concepts of time and the mathematical concepts of time and all those type of scenarios that we talk about in physics and whatnot, right? But just understanding that, time is really, wrapped into, everything universally that we do, right? Especially when it comes to competitive advantage along the lines of physical therapy and strength conditioning and performance training, sports training, whatever you want to talk about, but also, in our lives, right? So everything that we do, again, is, basically enveloped in this idea of time. But when we look at, especially a lot of the things that we've been talking about, and again, these competitive advantages in PT and wellness and performance, it really, really circles around time. Like, again, winning and losing can happen within a matter of milliseconds, right? But it's also about how you use your time, right? So you have this idea of we're in this finite moment right now where the timing on everything that we're doing right now matters so much, right? In a certain moment. But then you have this other idea that the time and the way that you're using your time, right, and how you're scheduling things and how you're managing yourself and everything that goes along with that also revolves around time. So understanding that that parameter is a very important thing to pay attention to, and everything that we're doing is huge in our lives, right? But then also when it comes down to movement, right? Movement and sequencing and coordination and all of these other things that revolve around that are all about time as well, right? So this component of timing is a big issue. Again, whenever we're going to go into start to talk about it, like we were talking about the myofascial stuff, and as we go in to talk about more movement and mechanics type of things, timing is going to become a bigger factor, right? So anytime that we're thinking about coordination, it has to have a certain syntax behind it, which again inherently denotes that we're focusing on some, component of time because of that. And again, all of these bullet points here are basically, fluctuating around that. The one that I think is a really interesting one is unforced errors, right? In most of the unforced errors that we make have something to do with timing or the way that we're managing our time in some scenario, whether it's, right in that moment you miss the time, or the way that you're doing something, you're not timing it correctly, or just in general, you are not taking advantage of the fact that you can manage your schedule and manage the time behind everything else that you're doing. And it's a huge part, I think, with programming, whether you're managing your tempos in your lifts, for example, the concentric to, amortization, isometric phase to the eccentric phase, and managing those numbers and those seconds that are going on during those movements, to, again, sequencing somebody's walking mechanics or their jumping mechanics and their running mechanics, and having them focusing on the timing that goes along with that. The last two or three bullet points here is about, using your time correctly. This idea that every second counts, because it does, because at the end of the day, right, that the last second, it's gone, right? The last 10 seconds, it's gone. The last, 5 minutes that we've been sitting on here, gone, right? That time that you have is finite, right? The time that we have here is going to be finite. So you want to make every second count, because they do count, right? And whether you're counting them or not, they're being counted. And how you use your time in every single way of your life ends up really dictating all the outcomes that you're going to have. And we look at that a lot of times in physical therapy as well as in the research that we have, and it's in fitness as well. It's kind of tough sometimes because, we want to compare things a lot of the times, but it's like, did this, one subject or group of subjects compared to another subject, how did they use their time differently, right? It's going to make a big difference. And sometimes it's really hard for us to say, okay, well, this group did this for 3 days a week and they did it for 2 hours a day and whatever. So now we're going to take that and we have to basically say, hey, if you want to get these same results, you need to use your time the same way as these other people did. But, you know, as well as you guys probably know at this point, that's the biggest struggle that everybody has is like we're talking about here, is using their time well. So that ends up being our job as well, to help coach people into using their time better so they can get better results. Now, the other side of it is, right, is all you need to do is make a little bit of a change. You know, you don't have to make some complete 360 or 180 type of change to see benefits, right? So being able to do a little bit of a change with your time and how you're using it creates momentum and gives you the habits that you need to have to really see success as you're moving forward with whatever you're talking about. And then this idea of deliberate practice, right? Have you guys ever heard of that term, deliberate practice?
Like, is that sort of just the idea of like practicing with a purpose? So you're not just sort of going through the motions. You're doing something with a purpose.
Right. It's very goal oriented, right? In terms of, again, the time that you're spent practicing everything. It's like evidence-based practice, right? Why are you using it or doing what you're doing? Why are you using the time the way that you're using it? Type of idea. So this is this big compounding effect. And again, the 10 out of 10 principle here is the same idea, right? Whenever you go into a practice situation or even into something like this that seemingly is, you know, loose and, you know, no you know, penalties or consequences, or really, you know, there's no incentives or benefits either. You know, how focused can you be during the time that you're spending, right? Are you at a 10 out of 10? Are you at a 10 out of 10 intensity during the time period that you need to be there? And, you know, one of the reasons why I have this on here is because this is usually the area that I see people struggle the most, right? Is that if you have 5 minutes to do something, most people, you know, screw around for 4 minutes and then they do something for 1 minute, right? And then they're like, why am I not getting the results that the dude that's doing everything for 5 minutes and stays focused at a 10 out of 10 for the whole 5 minutes is doing it, right? And ultimately over time, that's where you see the big separation between people, right? And between athletes, between groups and organizations, is this: how can we get the most out of our time, and how well can we focus during the time that we're in some type of, you know, task-oriented situation, or we're working on something that we want to execute. So that's, you know, again, coming back to the deliberate practice thing, right? It all revolves around time and also this motivation and goal setting and what was the word that you used? Purpose, Noah, right? So 100%. You know, at the same time, you can still feel this sense of purpose, but still not be able to manage and program it very well. So it's an important thing to think about just from that standpoint. And anytime that I'm working with groups of kids, this is one of the things that I talk to them about from the beginning. It's like, look, I'm not going to critique you because you can't do these movements perfectly, or you're not the strongest, or you're not the fastest. The one thing you can control is this focus that you have during the work period, right? I don't want you screwing around in your rest period either, because you can be learning something, but that work period is the time where it really matters. Are you engaged at a 10 out of 10, right? Because again, if we're talking about competitive advantage, that's what you're going to end up, you know, having a competitive disadvantage against somebody else that can, or another group or organization that can stay more focused during the work task oriented times. That make sense?
Yep.
Yep. So then these are all some more concepts